The following is an encore presentation of a pre-recorded program. Chats and evaluations were only available during the live presentation. To join one of CJE Senior Life's many live presentations, please visit cje.net/events, call 773-508-1000, or follow us on your favorite social media platform.
So I do have some opening remarks, and then we'll get into the content of the program. So first of all, this is our bi-monthly series brought to you by the Counseling Services Program at CJE Senior Life. And I'm Sharon Dornberg-Lee. I'm the Clinical Director of Community Services at CJE. And we want to be sure that everyone knows that we're offering counseling services to older adults and family caregivers, both via telehealth on a connection like this on Zoom, as well as in person in our Rogers Park and Deerfield offices. And we provide individual, family, and some group therapy options. And we also have a whole host of support groups. So if you want more information on these services and how to access them, you can always call 773-508-1000. And the concierge will get you the information you need and connect you to the right person. That's also the one-stop number for any CJE program, services, etc. You can also look on our website, which is cje.net, for more information on our services. So it's a pleasure to welcome you to this program today, which is Write Your Own Story. And this is really close to my heart because we're going to talk about writing, which I'm a writer as well. So it's close to my heart, but also about some of the mental health benefits of writing as a form of self-expression and the many other functions that writing about one's life can serve. So that mental health aspect is also my other passion. So they're coming together today in this program. If there are any professionals in the audience today, we're so happy to have you, but I do want to let you know right at the beginning that this program is intended primarily for community education, and we don't offer CEUs for these programs. Please do be aware that all of these programs are recorded and will be available on our website. That's why we're in this format where unfortunately we can't see each other, because we want to be able to record these and share it with others. And we're not allowed to do that if we have video of people's images without, people without their express permission. So we're using this webinar format. So when you registered, you provided an email, and you will then get a follow-up email with a link to the recording on our website. And you'll also get any other handouts. Today, the handouts are the slides for our program. And do know that even though you'll get that email today or next week, it does take several weeks for the recording of today's program to actually be edited and then posted there. But it will be up there in due time. We also want to encourage you to use the Q&A feature on your screen if you have a comment or question. We do disable the chat function for this program. That's just for the panelists to use so that everything's in one place and we don't get confused in terms of trying to respond. So use that Q&A for any comments or questions you may have. I should also note that I'm on my own today. Sometimes we have a second person from CJE here kind of scanning that Q&A, but she's out of town. So I'm going to do my best to both share this information with you and monitor the Q&A, but I might miss something, but be assured that I will get to everything at the end. I'm going to save time for your questions and comments. I also want to let you know that we have a CART transcriber for closed captioning. So somebody will be doing a live transcript of today's program, and you're going to need to manually turn that on your device if you would like to see the live transcript. So usually it's at the bottom of your screen. You'll see something that says CC or closed captioning live transcript. And you want to select the view that best fits your needs. It'll say full transcript or subtitles. And you can also adjust the font size there to meet your needs. If you're not seeing that button, try looking where it says more with 3 dots. And then you might see the word caption as an option there. And then that's where you can turn on the captions. So on to today's program. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to those lengthy announcements. Again, please be assured we will send you the slides, and I'm also going to send you a link to an evaluation for today's program, because your comments and feedback are really helpful to us and really help us to make sure we cover the topics you're interested in and address any concerns you may have. So let's see here. Okay, please let me know in the Q&A if anybody's not seeing the slides, because you should be seeing why write your story. So why should one think about this issue of perhaps writing one's memoir or even just some short chapters about one's life? And there are really so many reasons. One is, for some people, it really creates a sense of continuity or connection between their own past and where they're at now in their life, or even looking ahead to the future. Writing kind of helps us synthesize and process and understand ourselves and our histories. It's also something that many times people want to share with friends or with younger family members, and this is just a treasure trove for them if you take the time to do this. Sometimes people say to me, my grandchildren aren't really interested in my story or my history with sadness. And sometimes that changes. They may not be interested now, but if you read, they very well may be interested. But even if they aren't right now, they very well may be interested in the future, or this could even get passed down to their kids. And so it's something that really helps to kind of preserve your legacy for family or for friends. It's also a way just to pass down family traditions, family history. There's so many stories that I heard my grandparents tell that I was like, oh, I wish I had that now. I can't quite remember. It was just oral. It wasn't recorded. It never got written down. And then getting to the mental health functions of writing one's story, it's also really good for self-esteem often to think about, oh yeah, I did do that. We talk about in therapy connecting to one's former sense of self as one ages, and how strengthening that can be if you've been, struggling with some issues around aging, losses or changes in health. So just kind of connecting to that former sense of yourself can be really strengthening. And also just having people hearing your story can be really good for one's mental health. It also gives you an opportunity to reflect on and think about your life. What were the disappointments? What were the accomplishments and things you're really proud of? I took a class about writing essays about memoir about one's life, and the instructor said, when you tell a story from the past, that's all well and good. But part of what makes it really exciting for the reader and valuable for the author is to think about it from the perspective of the present. How do you feel about that now, looking back on your past? What has changed in your view and your perspective from where you're sitting now? That can both be really a delight for the reader, but also an opportunity for the writer to reflect on and think about their life. It can help people who might be feeling isolated, which is so many people, especially since the pandemic. Many people are struggling with isolation just as they age and have had losses. And so it's a way to kind of connect with other people and yourself through writing. It can also be really therapeutic, just in the sense that you can really look back on what were some of the conflicts in your life, some of the fears, what are some of the things you mastered. And then that in turn can be really something that can guide younger generations of how to cope with difficult situations. And it really promotes opportunities for intergenerational conversations and learning. So there are just many reasons that this can be such a helpful exercise to write your story. So sometimes the hardest part is getting started. Sometimes people are doing this alone. They may not have anybody to assist them. And I'm just going to pause to look in the Q&A. How will this help a senior, somebody's asking, without children or grandchildren or extended family? And I'm so glad you asked that, because there are so many solo agers out there who may not have family. But you may be able to find other ways to share this story. For one thing, it may be valuable just to do for yourself, just that you've done this and had a chance to process it. But there are other venues and ways to share your story too. And we're going to talk as we go on today about finding a writing group, finding other opportunities to even publish, finding venues where you can read a monologue that might be a chapter from your memoir. You may have friends, if you live in a senior community, or even if you don't, where people would really benefit from this. For example, on Facebook, there's a lot of groups about Chicago history, and I'm part of a number of those groups, and I love it when people share those stories about Chicago's past, because I'm fascinated by that. So you can be sharing it with total strangers. There's actually a Facebook group for my graduating class from high school, and there's a guy on there who's written his memoirs, and from time to time he just shares like an essay in that group. And I don't even know him. He's not from the same class, but I love reading these stories because it's like the old neighborhood that I grew up in and stories about the school that I went to. So there are ways that you can find to connect with other people who may be interested in your story. So getting started. Many people are going to be doing this alone, but maybe you can find a friend or a partner or a grandchild or a neighbor or a writing group member where you can interview each other, or they might just be willing to do this for you to help get the process going. But for many people, they're going to be doing it alone. And then you need to decide, are you going to do this using technology? Are you going to do this using paper and pen? If you do have a disability, for example, if you have arthritis and it's hard to type, have you looked into adaptive technologies? Can you use a voice recorder? If you're blind, are there technologies that you can use to make this possible and easier for you? For those who can use a computer, it's a great way to be able to print it and edit it. And so if you're comfortable using a computer or are willing to learn, then that's a great way to get started. And then I'd also just encourage folks to keep a notepad by the side of their bed. I think that's one of the tips that all writers suggest, is always have a little bit of paper and a pen on you, because sometimes inspiration strikes in the middle of the night. You just want to, oh my gosh, I forgot to tell about this hilarious story that happened to me. And you'll forget it if you don't write it down. So keep that by the bedside table or in your back pocket so that you can make notes as you're working on this project. And I'm just adding from the Q&A that somebody mentioned that that they have written their memoir, and even if no one had read it, they found it really rewarding to be able to complete that project. It was intrinsically rewarding for them. So thank you so much for sharing that. I agree with that too. Okay, sorry, just checking in with the Q&A there. So one of the most valuable pieces of advice I got, it wasn't about writing, but it was from, I used to work for Family Focus, and our board chair was this sort of like real estate magnate. And he always said, and I've always remembered this, if you want to get something done, set a deadline. And that's so true, I think, of writing one's memoir. And I should follow my own advice because I'm trying to publish a poetry chapbook. And to set a deadline so that it actually happens. If you think, oh yeah, one day I'd like to do that, or I'm going to get around to that. Let's be honest, we all know we have a tendency to procrastinate, at least I do. And so we want to set a deadline, be realistic. Maybe it's a year from now that you want to have a rough draft. Maybe it's in 3 months, set a deadline that works for you, but set one so that you're moving towards getting it done. And you can think about, what's my deadline for just having a first sentence done and my outline and then a rough draft, and then a final draft, and then to get it printed. Try to really break this up like you would handle a work project so that it really happens and isn't just something in the back of your mind that you wished you'd get to one day, and then time gets away from us. For some people, it helps them to read biographies before they get started or while they're working. It can be really inspirational. It can be intimidating too. I mean, I know I would love it if I could write like Maya Angelou, and I can't. But we can read other great memoirs or autobiographies for inspiration and just to get a sense, well, how did they structure this? Was it chronological? Did they just pull out some highlights of their life? So I just gave a couple examples here of people whose autobiographies you might want to read, but you can read whoever you like. You can browse at the library. And then decide, who are you writing for? Is this for family? Is this for your faith community? Is this for your neighborhood association? Are you trying to really get published and find a larger audience for your work? So kind of keep that in mind. I don't think you should self-censor as you're writing, but you should have a sense of who's your audience when you're writing. And then you want to look for ways to really kind of get that flow of memories going. And sometimes just looking at things to bring back those memories, or interviewing friends or family can be a way to kind of jumpstart your own memories. You can start by making a timeline of events. If that's helpful for you, like early childhood, teens, young adulthood, midlife, later life. And then just think at each stage of your life, maybe by looking at your own souvenirs and photographs and things, what are some of the things I really want to bring out and focus on here? Somebody mentioned in the comments that, yes, it's a good idea to set a deadline to get started, but once you started, you could just take your time in writing, because it's amazing what may come to mind if you just give it time. So that's a really valuable comment, right? We want to make sure we, have an end goal and don't procrastinate away. But this commenter is saying it's also really valuable to just kind of see where this flows and don't be so wed to a deadline that you're not really getting to let that creative process do its magic, where it just takes over. And somebody said, what are the questions one should ask and answer when writing their story? Just a great question. I think we're going to get to that some more as we go on, but I'm also just thinking there are a great series of questions I can email to you that we can use to interview other people about their life. But this would be great questions to ask yourself. So if we don't fully cover that today, I'm going to include that in the handouts. Great question. And then think about how you're going to organize your story. And an outline is a good idea. Some people like index cards, the old school way, where they get a box and index cards. I've seen writers use, Post-it notes that are all over a wall so that they're thinking about how they're going to organize all of this. And we'll get a little later in the program when we get to Erin, who's with us today, to talk about apps that are out there that can help as well. And that also goes to those questions you should ask yourself. So we'll get to that in a minute. A lot of people recommend to write every day. Some people can't do it. Your health or other commitments may get in the way. But if you can, even if it's just 5 minutes, to write a little every day and make it part of your routine. I'm just going to write 5 minutes and maybe you'll end up writing for an hour. But to set a modest goal, if you can, to write every day. Here's some examples of things that you might want to use just to trigger your memories. Like, think about your childhood best friend. As soon as I read that, I could think of 25 stories about my childhood best friend and some of the things we used to do together, places used to go. Immediately, I just thought of my best friend and I would take the bus to Harlem and Irving to go to Rolling Stone Records by ourselves. And that was like a big deal when we were preteen. So I could write a whole story about that. Can you close your eyes and remember some places from your childhood home, a relative's house, a school, a story, and just think about using all of your senses. What are the smells, the sound, the images, the things that come back to you when you have those memories? And I should probably say here too that some people have traumatic memories, really upsetting things. And so you might want to just kind of be prepared for the fact that emotions may come. You may or may not want to include those things in your memoir. For some people, that can be very powerful and therapeutic. For other people, they'd rather not revisit that. Whatever's right for you. But just be prepared for the fact that if you do have a trauma history, that it can be difficult and challenging, and it may give rise to some of these feelings. Sometimes talking about family traditions can be a wonderful thing to include, and especially not just to say, oh, here's an example of like being specific rather than general. Instead of saying we had a big crowd for Thanksgiving, it was a big deal in my family, you could talk about who was there, what was on the menu. Did you have any aunt or an uncle who always drank too much and made a scene? What were the things that made this really special and unique to your family? Because that's what's going to grab the reader, are these really unique details. Was there a turning point in your life? I remember once doing an exercise with an art therapist where they had us all take a pipe cleaner. And they said, this pipe cleaner is your lifeline. And I just want you to think about, like, where were the big events or twists and turns in your life? And just make a little twist in the pipe cleaner at those turning points. It was really an interesting exercise to think about your life that way. Were there pivotal moments, turning points? Sometimes they could be joyous things like the birth of a child. Sometimes it could be the loss of somebody you loved. Those things where time kind of stopped. And those are things you might want to write about. Also think about dialogue. Are there particular conversations that you might want to call up and write down? Again, that will give richness to your story. What were the soundtrack? What was the soundtrack of your childhood or your adult life? What were some of your favorite songs? And if you listen to those songs now, would that bring back memories of a particular time? Like Frank Sinatra, for me, brings back my mom because she was a huge fan. And I would probably think of stories about her if I was listening to that. And what's important to you? It doesn't have to be the same for everybody. For some people, they might want to write about a year of their life and nothing else that was just so important and pivotal. And for other people, they may want to do something that covers the full span of their life. Just going to check in with the Q&A again. And thank you so much for all your comments. Yes, my notes will be in PowerPoint. I definitely will share that with you guys. What software program is available? We're going to get to that. To speak my stories that can translate into a written copy. I don't exactly know the answer to that, but maybe Erin will when we get to Erin in just a minute or two. And otherwise, we can do some research and try to let you know what technologies might be helpful in that regard. Michelle, you mentioned I started writing when my husband was sick and when he was dying and I couldn't sleep. I'd start writing our family experiences. Now my writing has changed to more pensive essays on aging. It's a mishmash of stories and writing styles. What do I do with it? That's a great question. First of all, I'm very moved by what you said, so thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's okay to have a mishmash. Maybe it's a collection of essays that you look for a publisher for, or that you self-publish. Maybe it's not a collection at all. Maybe you want to take the pensive essays on aging and submit them. If you go to submittable.com, you can find about ways to actually, publish various stories or essays. You can search it by keywords like aging or essays and see what's out there and who's looking for that kind of material. Submittable.com. And so maybe you want to publish some of these things separately, or maybe you want to just put the whole mushmash together, which is what all of our lives are, and self-publish it as a book, or look for a publisher, depending on how ambitious you are. Great question. And by the way, I don't have the answers to all of these things, but I'll do my best to try to get you answers. Sometimes people write too about things that they're most proud of, their regrets, but also what were some of the most important days in history that you lived through? That's the kind of thing that'll be very valuable to any reader, whether it's a total stranger or family or friends. Just your recollections of some of the days that spring to all of our minds, where you were, what was happening, what was it like for you? What are your memories of that day? How do you think about it now with the vantage point of time and distance? And everybody is engaged to funny stories. So what are some of the memories that even now will make you laugh out loud every time you think of them? Do you want your story to be chronological, thematic? How do you want to organize this? That's up to you, but it's something to think about, right? Rather than, just kind of try to figure it out later. It might be something you want to think about in advance. And then I mentioned earlier, maybe you want to tell your whole life story. Maybe you want to focus on, your year in the Peace Corps or whatever, and just have that be the story you're telling. Also, think about the level of detail. I think people make mistakes in both areas. They can give so much detail that the average person doesn't want to read it. It just goes on and on and on. Or a lot of people make the opposite mistake. They're so general that I don't really feel like I'm getting to know you as the reader, that I want to know the specific things that made this really a rich experience with detail. But again, not so much that it's going on for pages and pages and pages to describe the table setting, right? Nobody would want to read that level of detail. So now getting into some of the tools. Carol McConnell couldn't join us today. She's actually a former staff person at CJE of many years ago, and she wrote this book called This Is My Life, My Autobiography. I believe it's still available on Amazon.com. It's just a book she came up with to help people, again, with these questions. Somebody was asking, what questions should I ask myself? This is a way that you can organize that. Here's a couple of other books that I've listed, and again, I'll send you this, that you can use to organize yourself in writing your memoir if you prefer to approach that by reading a book or a book with space to write. When you do complete a chapter, give it some time to rest before you come back to it. If you have somebody who can read it for you, like a writing group or a friend, then they can give you some advice. Don't be afraid to make it funny. I think humor is always a winner and powerful. And just think about what is your voice. You don't have to copy anybody else's style. And just also try to polish your own writing. Are you being too repetitive? Do you want to look at a thesaurus for some other words? Or what are the things that you might want to use to help yourself polish your writing? And then if you can, ask people to help you by giving you feedback and to be honest. And then make your revisions to think about, what suggestions do I want to listen to and which ones do I want to disregard? It's your work, right? I'm in a poetry workshop, and once a month we meet and we workshop each other's poems. And then afterward, we take that back home. And sometimes I think they were absolutely right. I've got to change this. And sometimes I think there's no way I'm changing that. I liked it the way it was, right? So that's your decision, but you want to think about all that feedback with an open mind. Do you want to add images and pictures, either things from the web or, scan photos from your own photo album? And then you'll get into like the real nitty gritty at the end about chapter headings and a table of contents and that sort of thing. And there are classes for people who want to write their story. Beth Fink, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name right. She charges about $80, I think, per class. And she teaches classes all around the area. So I just put her website in the slides. I think she teaches at the Levy Center, perhaps, and several other senior buildings and locations. So she's pretty well known in our area. The Levy Center does have a writing group that I think it's just self-led. And that one, I think just to be a member of the Levy Center is $50. And I think the classes are free. You better double check that. I think that's accurate, but I gave a phone number for more information about that writing group. And then at long last, because he's been patiently waiting here, I wanted to introduce Aaron Greenberg, who is with Biograph, is his company. And here's Aaron. Hi, Aaron. We're so glad you're here with us today. And we want you to share with us about biograph, but also just your wisdom, because I know you've been in this arena for a long time. So welcome. Anything you'd like to share, we'd love to hear.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you all for being here. I can't emphasize enough how important this work is, even if sometimes it might feel extracurricular, or as some of you said, if maybe your grandkids don't seem to care or they don't seem to care right now. I really don't think that there's anything more valuable for the present and the future than telling your story. So just being here already is a great first step. I just wanted to underscore some points that Sharon said that I couldn't agree more with. Writing as a way to establish continuity between the past, present, and future. And again, for those who think their grandkids might not be interested now, that's the beauty of putting your story down, is because when that time comes, which it inevitably will, that they are interested, they'll have your story, even if you're not in the room to share it. And even better, if you can speak that story and so that your posterity can hear your voice in the way that you tell your story and the way that you pronounce words, as well as the writing. And a few pieces of advice that I would add as way of transitioning to talking about Biograph, the company I started with my brother to help folks tell their stories, is the power of stating the obvious. Things that you think may not be so interesting right now, or that may be so obvious that they go without saying. They should not go without saying, because what's obvious to you today is not obvious to you tomorrow or in the days to come. And what's so obvious to you today is not obvious to your family. And so taking the time to just state the obvious is so powerful, even if it doesn't seem, profound at the time. So I began Biograph with my brother about 5 years ago, to help people tell their stories. And we've worked with individuals and families that tell collective stories across generations. And key to our process, and I think really one of the most useful ways to approach telling the story of your life, is by speaking. Some of you may enjoy the pleasure of pen and pad or sitting at your computer and writing, and there's definitely great value into that. But even if you do enjoy writing in the traditional sense, and for those that don't consider yourselves writers, or for other reasons cannot or do not wish to write, the power of speaking is so tremendous. And I saw one of the questions in the chat was, how do you speak your story into a software that would then transcribe it and write it. And in fact, after working with folks, and our process is all about having conversations, authentic conversations that I hesitate to call interviews, because that sounds so stuffy and formal and so much pressure to have an interview about your life story, but rather to treat these as conversations on the record and record it. And I'll share, and Sharon already did share some of it. I'll put it in again, a link to the Biograph app, which we designed to make our service more accessible. So you don't have to hire folks like us to be there in the room, and you can tell your story into the app and it will transcribe on its own. And the thing I would emphasize here is that we're telling our stories every day, even if it doesn't seem like that's what's happening. These are so many of the most interesting parts of memoir and autobiography that I've seen. They really emerge from those spontaneous, authentic conversations that you're having with family around the breakfast, lunch, or dinner table anyway, or on walks. That's when we are our most authentic selves, and the selves that appear most poignantly and interestingly in a story, rather than when we put all this pressure on ourselves to sit down and tell our story, starting from the beginning. So I would really encourage you through apps like Biograph, and I can share other tools as well, to just, and Sharon said something along these lines, but to just get started, which is the hardest part. But once you do, it just becomes, in the best cases, it becomes part of a daily practice that really does have well-documented therapeutic value. And you can feel it after an hour of telling your story, even just to yourself. You feel better, and there's science to back that up too. Because we are, as some have called humans, not Homo sapiens, but Homo neurons. We are storytelling animals. That's in nature, and to tell your story is just really, it's one of the most human things you can do. So I don't want to keep rambling on, but I want to just offer myself as a resource. For anyone, I can put my email in the chat, and I would always be happy to answer any questions. We are also, in addition to having the Biograph app, which you can tell your story and have it transcribed, and it's designed so that it is, you don't have to sit down for an hour, tell your story, speak, and forever hold your peace. Rather, it's designed so that when inspiration strikes, maybe just a memory, occurs to you at 2 a.m, or while you're out on a walk, you can just share a memory and trust that it's safely kept, and then return to it and add to it whenever inspiration strikes. I think that's an important part of the process too, is not necessarily to put this pressure on yourself to do it all in one chunk, because that's not how our minds work all the time. So in addition to the app, we are also a publisher, and we've worked with hundreds of folks, especially our beloved Jewish community in around Chicago, to both tell their stories from the minute they've got the idea, all the way through publication if they wish, whether that's kind of producing it in a coffee table book privately for the family, or to have it up on Amazon, so your dearest friends and strangers even can always buy your book and have it on their doorstep in a couple days. So I'm happy to be a resource to any of you for any part of the process that you may need. And thanks so much, Sharon, for having
thank you so much for being here. I didn't even realize how your app worked. It sounds like a wonderful tool. There's some questions here. First of all, when you put your resources and contact information, put it in the Q&A, because the attendees won't be able to see the chat.
Sure, will do.
So let's go through some of these questions together. These are great questions. What if you want to make it a history of your family in America, not a personal story? I mean, I would say, and Aaron, I think you just popped that in the chat, but pop it in the Q&A instead.
Okay, gotcha.
Because otherwise everybody can't see it.
Sure.
So I think that's a great question. I don't know why I thought of that book, which is actually a novel, Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner, which turned out he took it from his aunt's journal, I think. It was a big scandal because I think he won the Pulitzer Prize, and he never disclosed that this was really taken from family journals. He just presented it as a work of fiction. Anyway, regardless, it's a beautiful book. That's the story of somebody's history in America. And I think that's a wonderful way to write. There's no right or wrong when it comes to this. In fact, telling the history of your family in America might even have a broader audience than just one person's story. So I think you can use these same tools and techniques that we're talking about and write your story however you want to write it. Aaron, we may have lost the moment here of what they were referring to, but somebody said, Aaron, what do you mean by to state the obvious? Do you remember?
Sure, of course. So, it could be something as simple as what your parents' names were, or what your grandparents' names were, or what street you grew up on, or what your first job was. Things that are just so intimate to your own personal history that they might seem to go without saying, but your grandchildren, great grandchildren, that's precious detail that I would love to know without having to dig through ancestry.com records. I would love to know in my great grandfather's own voice what his first job was and how he felt about it. And those are the sort of things that oftentimes go overlooked or unsaid in a story. And so being disciplined about stating those kinds of obvious things goes a long way.
Thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying that. A couple people just thanked you and are commenting on how helpful this is. One person said, what are options for publishing written family stories for my family other than just printing it and binding it? Are there things that make it look better and aren't expensive? And Aaron just mentioned that they publish through his business, and you have his contact information. And then also, I'm going to share a couple of additional resources on that. And Aaron, I'm going to start sharing the screen again, but Aaron, you're welcome to stay on if you're able to. And as additional
so
questions
much.
arise, or if you have anything to add. So we talked about some of these writing groups. And then, if you're looking for a group, you could also just, I don't know if you guys are familiar with meetup.com, but if it's I think there might be a small membership group. I think at fee, or I think it's free, where you just go on there and you can search for writing groups, and you might find other writing groups, people just to help read your stuff and workshop it with you. Second City has fun, like humorous memoir writing classes, or at least they have in the past, in person and online. Those are a little pricier. Story Studio is another place in Chicago where they have online and in-person classes, and they can be super expensive, like $1,500, or as little as $55 the last time I checked. There's something called the Chicago Writers Association. So all of these are places that you can find a writing group if that's something that interests you. So why do a group? There's a lot of benefits. I think it can be motivating. Like when I mentioned that I took that essay writing class, I had to produce an essay every week. And that, for me as a procrastinator and a busy person, really just helped me. So writing groups can be really helpful. There can be a professional facilitator. You can get writing prompts. You'll hear other people's stories. It's really nice to get some live feedback from an audience, and it can just make it less of a lonely process. I see somebody raised a hand, and unfortunately in this webinar format, I can't call on you, but do put your question or comment in the Q&A, and we'd be happy to hear your question or comment in that way. We do want to hear from you. And then these are just some resources of things, I don't know if you're familiar with StoryCorps. To be honest, I didn't have a chance to double check if it's still ongoing, but that's a project through the Chicago Cultural Center where you can schedule a time, often with a partner, to record your story. But also they have wonderful tools at their website, storycorps.org. And then here's a couple of articles and things that I thought might be interesting, and you'll be getting these slides. And then getting back to this printing issue, Amazon used to have a short run service where you could just give them your information and they would very inexpensively print like 1 copy or 10 copies. And I think that's changed or been renamed. So I left that off today. I'm not sure what the status of that one is. Aaron's talking about at Biograph that they also offer a publishing option. They call it short run. So in other words, you're not printing, most of you won't be printing 10,000 copies. You might be printing 1 copy or 5 copies. So you're looking for short run presses. And here are a couple that I'm aware of: 48-Hour Books. This Oblero this link has a list of places that print. The other term that they use is on-demand books. And there's something called Book Baby. Another one is called Lightning Source. So these are all places that you can Google and look and see if which one of these is the best match for your needs. And then also, finally, getting near the end here, I just wanted to say, when you do finish this, consider having a book release party, even if it's for you and 3 neighbors, or if it's for everybody you know, or maybe Women and Children First, if you're a woman, would want to host you to have a book release party and give a reading and sell your books, or any other local bookstore. Depending on what you've written, it may or may not have that kind of a broad appeal. But even if it's just over, the dinner table with 3 neighbors, think about celebrating in some way with the book release party. And if you live in a senior community, then you could think about having it as an event there to perhaps read a few pages of your memoir and celebrate. So think about ways to celebrate your completion of this project. For some people, they might want to even do a broader release and distribute copies to everybody they know, or if you're in a book group, distribute it that way. And again, I'm so glad for the person who mentioned the solo agers out there who might think, well, I don't have family to pass this on to. Where else can you share this, as I mentioned earlier, with people who may have an interest in some of the stories you have to tell, whether it's a childhood friend, whether it's somebody you just met at the senior center, whether it's publishing it on a Facebook group or more of a formal publication like through Kindle on Amazon. You'll decide what's right for you and your story. So congratulations for being here to start that process. So one of you at least has already completed the process, and it sounds like a number of you have been writing. So we want to, I'm going to stop sharing at this point, but I want to check back in on the Q&A. Judith, you just said, thank you. You've been looking for all this information. Elise, you also just extended thanks for this information we've provided. Are there any other questions or comments today? Oh, somebody just thanking us for this. So we've got a few more minutes left. So if there aren't additional questions, but I'll keep looking. I just want to mention again that this program is brought to you by CJE Senior Life Counseling Services, and we offer mental health services, both in terms of individual and group and group therapy, as well as family therapy. And we have a bunch of support groups. We've got 2 new groups that are both therapy groups that are billable to insurance that I wanted to mention today. One is for people who are living with chronic pain. And it's an 8-week kind of skills-oriented group to teach you some skills for coping with pain and reducing pain. I've just, with my co-leader, Peter Circus, finished 1 round of that, and people found it really helpful. So we're going to be doing it again in the fall. Peter and one of our interns will be leading it this time. And on our website, cje.net, you'll see information about that group on our calendar, but we also will send out e-blasts, and we'll make sure you get them to tell you how to pre-screen and register for that group. The other group that I wanted to mention is called Making Connections, and that's for people who have an adult child with a disability of any kind, whether it's a mental illness or an intellectual disability or a physical disability. They have support, they have educational resources, but Making Connections is the support group of linkages to help folks in that situation. So again, you can find out about that group by calling 508-1000, 773-508-1000, or looking on our website. The third group that I wanted to mention is another therapy group. It's cognitive behavioral therapy for depression and anxiety. And that means, in a nutshell, thinking about our own thought processes and how our thought processes affect our mood, and learning to intervene in a way to improve our mood. So those are 3 groups. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have a therapy, one-on-one therapy program called Pearls. That's just 6 to 8 sessions. And it's a very structured way of working on some problems where you're in the driver's seat, but you have a coach to help you figure out how to approach some of life's problems if you're feeling some symptoms of depression. Okay, so those are all my announcements about some particular services I wanted to highlight. And I want to get back to the Q&A. Phil, you mentioned you avoided any kind of writing of your whole life. Just recently you've thought about it, and you're asking if there are any suggestions for getting over the avoidance. And Erin, I'm not sure if you're still on or if you had to hop off. I think some of the tools that we've talked about hopefully will be helpful to you. The most important thing is to get started. Why have you avoided writing? Is it because you think you're not good at it? I would say disabuse yourself of that notion. Nobody starts out good at it. Sometimes people have had negative experiences where maybe a teacher was mean to you and said something really kind of soul crushing and you thought, oh, I can't write. Well, try to let that go and just imagine that floating away and trying to let your creative juices flow with the idea that nobody needs to ever look at this. It's just for you to start and maybe forever, so that there's no judgment. And can you give yourself this goal of, I'm going to write 5 minutes in a journal just for me and see what comes, and set a deadline. When am I going to start this? By the end of September, I'm going to have written 3 days for 5 minutes, for example. Set a modest goal that's really achievable. So those are my suggestions. I'm so glad you're thinking about writing. Writing can be hard work, laborious, crazy making sometimes, but it can also be so rewarding and be a form of self-discovery. So good for you for thinking about getting started, Phil. Some people are just thanking us here in the comments. Somebody said, if we have follow-up questions, can we contact CJE? Of course. If you have questions about our general services, call 508-1000. Again, the area code is 773. If you have questions about today's program, don't hesitate to call or email me, Sharon Dornberg-Lee. You can call 508-1000 and ask to speak to me. Let me just put my email in the Q&A here. Oh, the hosts actually aren't allowed to put anything in the chat, but my number, you can call me at 773-508-1000. Please send the biograph information. I will do that. Shana Tova, Shabbat Shalom to you as well. Linda, thank you. Thank you, Jill, for your comments. Jill already downloaded the biograph app. Good for you. Somebody is sharing an event here at the Newberry Library. So let me read this out. This is great information. It's called The Art of Personal Storytelling. It's led by Jill Howe, H-O-W-E. It's every week on Saturdays from November 4th to December 6th at the Newberry Library, for those of you who are more in that downtown area. I'm going to copy that information and send it off to you guys too. Does CJE have a writing group? You know, I don't think we do have a writing group, and I wish we did. We have so many other groups, and I'm trying to think. I don't think there's definitely not a memoir writing group, and I don't think there's any writing group, but I'm going to suggest that. That would be something nice for us to have. Wouldn't that be terrific? Bert, you asked if you're not comfortable writing, you can minimize writing by using photographs with short captions or just a paragraph around the photos. That's a great idea. And that's a terrific tip for people who don't want to write volumes, but they still want to share their stories. Other people are asking for the biograph information. Davida will be sure to get that to you. And Elise, you said you had to go answer the door. Life happens. Can we publish the groups we're talking about somewhere? Yes, indeed. I'm going to send out a follow-up email, and we will make sure to get that information, all of today's slides, the biograph information, and then this event at the writing group at the Newberry Library. I'm going to get all of that to all of you. So with that, we're going to sign off. Let's see, I had a couple closing remarks. Let me pull those up. Might have covered them all already. Let's just see if I'm forgetting everything. Just thank you so much for being here. I'm going to send you a link. Actually, let me put that in the Q&A right now for those who want to just, hopefully I can find it here. Give me a moment. The evaluation, my apologies. I should have had that ready to go. Here it is. I'm going to put the link for the evaluation in the Q&A right now. So as people are leaving, they can do that. But if you didn't get to it today, you can also do it from the follow-up email. that will also be included there. So give me one moment here. Oh, again, I can't initiate things in the Q&A. Okay, unfortunately, there's some weird glitches with this system where I can't put something in the Q&A, only the attendees can. So never mind, I will send you the link in the email for our evaluation, and please take the time to do that. We're so happy that you're here. And again, there'll be a link to the recording of today's program on our website, cje.net. I'm going to send you the link, but it's going to take a while for that to show up there. And at the same link, you can find all of our other Insights on Aging programs that we've recorded if you've missed any in the past and want to watch them. So thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to be with all of you. I love being with writers and people who love writing. And so I'm really glad you are here. Thank you. And we hope you'll, oh, by the way, that's the last thing. Our next program is going to be November 10th. Let's see. November 10th, which is also a Friday at 11. And our speaker is going to be Wendy Singer, who is with No Shame on You. They're an organization that is dedicated to removing stigma around mental health and mental illness. And the topic is going to be gratitude, right in time for Thanksgiving, and how focus on gratitude can be good for all of our mental health. Okay, be well, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.